Okay, so imagine this. You're just, relaxing, having your coffee and like checking your bank balance online, maybe buying something. And all of a sudden, bam, your phone's blowing up with notifications and you realize someone's cleaning out your account.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty terrifying thought, right?
Yeah, definitely.
That feeling of helplessness, like, what do you even do?
Right.
So that's what we're talking about today, bank fraud in Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
And how to protect yourself. And we've got a great guest with us today to help us break it all down.
Yes.
Bakheit Amrri, he is here in Saudi Arabia, but he also has a background in computer science from the U.S.
Oh, wow.
So that's a pretty unique combination.
Yeah, that is really interesting.
I'm really curious, when I think about lawyers, I usually think about courtrooms and contracts.
Right.
Not, lines of code.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how these two fields, law and computer science, how they kind of come together, especially when we're talking about financial fraud.
Well, these days, a lot of the evidence we see in these cases is digital. It's all about log files, transactions, records, sometimes even malware on someone's computer.
Ah.
So you really need to be able to understand all of that technical stuff if you want to build a strong case.
So it's almost like you're a detective, but instead of fingerprints and footprints, you're looking for these digital trails.
Exactly. It's like a digital detective story. And that's where having a background in computer science can be really helpful.
I could see that.
You have to be able to understand how these systems work.
Right.
How the data is stored, how it can be manipulated.
Insights in a newsletter called Saudi Laws on LinkedIn, right?
That's right. It's a great way to keep people informed about the latest legal developments.
Awesome. I'll definitely have to check that out.
You should.
So for now, let's focus on what Saudi law actually says about bank fraud. Are there laws in place, to protect people in these situations?
Yes, absolutely there are. Saudi law does offer protection to consumers. For example, we have the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority, also known as SAMA,
Okay.
and they handle a wide range of banking complaints. So that's a good place to start.
Good to know.
But the thing is, navigating the legal system here, it can be a little tricky.
Tricky in what way?
Well, for example, if you file a complaint with the wrong authority, you could end up waiting months.
Oh, no.
Like 6 to 12 months just to be told that they can't actually help you.
Oh, wow. That's a nightmare.
Yeah, it can be a real problem because while you're waiting, the trail gets cold, your money's gone, it becomes much harder to recover.
Right. So time is really of the essence here.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have someone who knows the system,
Okay.
who can guide you to the right place from the start.
So knowing where to go for help is crucial.
It is.
But then there's the question of proof.
Right.
How do you actually prove that you've been a victim of bank fraud?
Right.
Especially, in this digital world where things can be so easily manipulated.
That's a really good question, and that's where the cybersecurity part comes in.
Okay.
Because a lot of times, proving fraud requires technical evidence. So we're talking about analyzing log files from bank servers. You might need to search for unauthorized login attempts and trace, transactions through the internet. It can get really complicated.
So it's not just about, collecting your bank statements and your receipts anymore. You need someone who can actually go into that digital world and find the clues.
Exactly. You need someone who can understand what those clues mean.
Okay.
For example, let's say that investigators find an unauthorized login attempt coming from a suspicious IP address. Maybe on the other side of the world. Well, that's great. That's a strong piece of evidence, but you need someone who knows how to interpret that information and present it in a way that's compelling to a court.
Right. So it's like having a tech detective.
Yes.
On your side, but one who also speaks fluent legalese.
Yeah, exactly. It's a specialized skill set for sure.
Well, I am definitely starting to see how complex this can get. So let's break it down even further.
Sure.
So let's say someone's listening right now and they think, maybe this has happened to me.
Okay.
What should they do? What's like the first step?
The first thing is don't panic.
Okay.
I know that's easier said than done.
Right.
When you see, your money disappearing.
Yeah.
But panicking is just going to cloud your judgment.
So deep breaths, everybody.
Exactly, deep breaths. And then once you've kind of calmed down a little bit, you need to start documenting everything.
Okay, everything. What does that mean?
I mean, every single transaction detail, like the date, the amount, the recipient, even if it seems insignificant.
Got it.
Take screenshots of any suspicious activity you see on your online banking.
Okay.
Print out any emails or letters that are related to the issue.
So it's kind of like you're building this, paper trail, a step-by-step record of everything that's happened.
Exactly, because remember, the burden of proof often falls on the customer.
Okay.
So you need to be able to show exactly what happened, when it happened, and how it impacted you financially.
So even if it feels really overwhelming in the moment, being really persistent with that documentation is super important.
It's crucial. And don't forget about offline interactions, too.
Okay, what do you mean?
So if you call your bank, write down the date, the time, who you spoke to, and like a quick summary of the conversation.
Sure.
All those little details can help build your case.
What if the bank is being difficult?
Okay.
What if they're, slow to respond or they're kind of dismissive of your concerns?
Document that too.
Okay.
Keep a record of every interaction, every delay, every unanswered question. It's all about creating that clear timeline of events.
Right.
And showing that you took reasonable steps to try and resolve the issue.
So patience and persistence are key here.
They are. And this is where having someone like Bakheit can be so helpful.
Okay.
Because he's dealt with so many cases like this. He knows exactly what kind of documentation is going to be most effective. Now, you mentioned earlier that there are, different types of fraud beyond just the obvious, stolen credit card scenario.
Right.
What are some of the more subtle ways that people can be scammed?
Yeah, so one example is unauthorized transfers.
Okay.
This is where someone gains access to your account and they transfer money out without your permission.
Okay, how does that happen?
It can happen through phishing scams, malware that steals your login credentials,
right,
or even just someone physically stealing your debit card and your PIN.
Wow. So even if you're careful with your cards and, your online purchases, your account could still be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Another example is incorrect deductions.
Okay.
These can be harder to spot because they often involve smaller amounts.
Okay.
So it could be like a subscription that you thought you canceled,
right,
but they're still billing you for it, or a bank error that results in an overcharge, or even a merchant charging you twice for the same purchase.
It's like financial death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah, exactly. Those small, seemingly insignificant deductions can really add up over time.
So it sounds like being vigilant and proactive are really important.
Absolutely. And if you see something that doesn't look right, don't hesitate to contact your bank immediately.
Okay.
The sooner you address the issue, the better your chances of resolving it quickly and minimizing any losses.
Now, we talked about, the documentation part of things. But what about the technical side? You mentioned earlier that proving fraud often requires digital evidence.
Right.
So can you explain what that means?
Sure. So let's say you suspect that someone's made unauthorized transactions from your account.
Okay.
To prove that, you might need to analyze log files from your bank's servers.
Okay.
These files basically record every action that's taken on your account.
Got it.
Including login attempts, transfers, payments, everything.
So it's kind of like a digital fingerprint of everything that's happened?
Exactly. And by analyzing those logs, we can pinpoint, the exact time and location of a fraudulent login, or trace the path of the stolen money through a series of online accounts.
Wow.
It can get pretty technical.
So it's not just about having a lawyer who knows the law.
Right.
You need someone who can actually read those digital fingerprints.
Yes.
And understand what they mean.
Exactly. Someone who knows what to look for and how to use that information to build a strong case.
It's almost like a whole new area of legal expertise is emerging.
It is.
This blend of law and cybersecurity.
It is. And it's an area that Bakheit is really passionate about.
Okay.
He's seen firsthand how crucial this technical evidence can be.
Now, I know you also mentioned that he sometimes recommends filing a police report.
Yes.
Even if someone isn't entirely sure that they've been scammed.
Right.
Why is that?
There are a few reasons for that.
Okay.
First of all, it creates an official record of the incident.
Okay.
Second, it shows that you're taking the matter seriously and that you're willing to cooperate with law enforcement. And third, it can be really helpful if the stolen money is later used for illegal activities.
So it's not just about recovering your own funds.
Yeah.
It's about potentially preventing further harm.
Exactly. It's about taking a proactive approach and protecting yourself from the ripple effects of financial crime.
Okay, because those ripple effects can extend, way beyond that initial incident.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about documenting everything, analyzing log files, even involving the police. It sounds like having someone like Bakheit on your side can be a real game changer in these situations.
It really can, because he not only knows the law and the technology, but he also knows how to navigate that often frustrating world of banking bureaucracy.
I can imagine.
You know, he can help you cut through the red tape advocate for your rights and make sure you're taking the right steps to protect yourself, both legally and financially.
It's like having a legal and financial Sherpa guiding you through this, treacherous mountain range.
Yeah, I like that analogy. He's there to help you navigate the difficult terrain, avoid the pitfalls, and ultimately reach your goal of justice and financial recovery.
I love that.
He really is a unique resource, especially here in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing there aren't too many people who have that kind of dual expertise, in both law and computer science.
You're right. It's a pretty rare combination.
Especially when you're talking about, these really specific cases.
Exactly. And it's so valuable because he can not only understand the legal complexities,
right,
but he can explain them in a way that makes sense to someone who maybe doesn't have a legal background.
So he's kind of like a translator then.
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Bridging the gap between, that legal world and the everyday person.
Exactly. Someone who just wants to understand what's going on and how to protect themselves.
Right. And that's so important, especially when you're talking about something like bank fraud, where, people might be feeling really vulnerable.
Absolutely. And Bakheit's a strong advocate for his clients, too. He's not afraid to stand up to the banks and other institutions to fight for what's right.
That's reassuring to hear.
Yeah. And remember, he's not just focused on reacting to fraud after it's already happened.
Okay.
He's really passionate about educating people and helping them be proactive about protecting themselves.
And that's, part of the reason why he started his Saudi Laws newsletter on LinkedIn, right?
Exactly. It's all about empowering people with information.
So what kind of information does he share in his newsletter?
Well, he covers a wide range of topics related to Saudi law.
Okay.
So everything from banking and financial regulations to consumer protection laws, even cybersecurity tips.
Oh, wow. So it's like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, you could say that.
Of legal knowledge.
And he breaks down these complex legal concepts into easy-to-understand language.
Okay.
So it's a great resource for anyone who wants to stay informed.
Awesome. So it's like having a personal legal advisor right in your inbox.
That's a great way to put it.
Keeping you updated on all the latest developments and potential risks.
Exactly. And it's a free resource.
Even better.
So I highly recommend subscribing to it.
Definitely will do. Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something you said earlier.
Okay.
About the long-term liabilities of fraud.
Right.
Could you explain a little bit more about what you meant by that?
Sure. So sometimes stolen money is used for illegal activities.
Okay.
Like money laundering or funding terrorism.
Wow.
And even though you're the victim of the initial theft, you could actually find yourself facing legal consequences.
Oh, no.
Years down the line.
Really?
If the authorities trace those funds back to you.
That's a scary thought.
It is. So it's not just about getting your money back.
Right.
It's also about protecting yourself from potential legal troubles in the future.
And that's another area where having someone like Bakheit on your side can be so crucial.
Exactly. Because he can help you understand those risks and take steps to mitigate them.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I think a lot of people assume that if they're careful with their cards and their passwords, they're safe. But as we've discussed, it can be a lot more complex than that.
It can, especially in this digital age where things are constantly changing.
Right. The methods that criminals are using are always evolving.
Exactly.
It can be hard to keep up.
It can, but that's why it's so important to be aware of the risks.
Okay.
To take steps to protect yourself and to know where to turn for help.
So for our listeners out there, what are some of the key takeaways that they should keep in mind?
Well, first of all, be vigilant.
Okay.
Scrutinize those bank statements. Monitor your credit card activity. Be wary of any suspicious emails or phone calls.
What else?
Be proactive. Use strong passwords. Enable two-factor authentication.
Okay.
Keep your software up to date. And of course, consider subscribing to Bakheit Saudi Law's newsletter to stay informed about the latest scams and legal developments.
Awesome. And finally,
don't be afraid to seek help. If you think you've been a victim of fraud, don't hesitate to contact your bank, the authorities, or a legal professional like Bakheit.
Right. The sooner you take action, the better.
Exactly.
Excellent advice. Well, this has been incredibly informative. I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
And given our listeners a lot to think about. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about bank fraud and how to protect yourself, the better equipped you'll be to stay safe out there.